We're here with Stephen Page, co-founder and lead singer of the Barenaked Ladies out of Toronto. Steve, let's talk about the current tour first. You're just about to complete a 22-city sweep of Canada.
Right.
That started on Halloween night in Vancouver. And prior to that, you had some dates in the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did about 6 weeks down in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. What kind of places were you in down there?
Well, we did all across the U.S. pretty well. The only place we didn't hit was the southern U.S., playing kind of large clubs and small theaters. So
I see.
It's moving up there now.
Well, tell me generally how you've been received in both countries during this tour. Then be a little more specific as to where it would seem, or where you guys seem to think your biggest fan bases are right now.
Our biggest fan bases tend to be in Western Canada for some reason now. Places that used to be really strong for us, like Toronto and Ottawa, aren't nearly as strong as they used to be. But places like Vancouver and Edmonton and Winnipeg are still incredibly strong. But the places that are really starting to boom are some of the U.S. places like Chicago and New York and Los Angeles, as well as places like Boulder, Colorado, and Phoenix, Arizona.
They're more or less just picking up on you now, I guess.
That's right. Well, New York's been pretty good for the last couple of years, but it's started to grow into a sizable audience where we can play to like a good theater-sized crowd.
So you are doing concert halls down there?
Yeah, we did a place. Last time we were down there, we did a place called the Town Hall, which is a nice. It's a little smaller than say it'd probably be like the Tivoli in Hamilton.
Oh, I see. Will there be a UK leg of this tour, or is this upcoming break through the Christmas season an extended one with no immediate plans to follow?
Well, we did a week in the UK the week the album came out.
Oh, you did? You've already done some Brit.
Yeah,
oh, I see.
It's a very quick tour there,
and
it was actually really good. The album hasn't really taken off there. It hasn't been getting very much radio play, but we've got a pretty good live following, so we may go back in the summer. But what the plan is right now is we're going to take Christmas break, and then about middle of January we'll go back down to the U.S. and do another 6 or 8 weeks down there, and then we're going to come back home and make a new record.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll have something out by October even.
Oh, terrific. Let's shift gears here for a minute. I want to talk about Maybe You Should Drive. Sorry, no pun intended.
Quite all right.
Gordon, of course, was tremendously successful in this country, selling over 800,000 copies, producing 4 major hits, while in America it managed, I believe, somewhere in the range of 100,000. As far as you know, how is Maybe You Should Drive currently doing, both sales-wise and chart-wise?
Sales-wise, I know it's about 200,000 here in Canada. And I think it's about 70,000 in the U.S. right now.
Yeah. Well, let's be honest. For a second album, that's pretty enviable by most band standards, I would think.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, I know there's still growth for it. I just don't. None of us in the band expected that it would be, the same kind of success that Gordon was, because that was pretty much a kind of a pop phenomenon. Really, it wasn't indicative of the kind of success I think we could plan on having. I don't think we ever expected to have a Bryan Adams kind of career where we could be guaranteed of selling X million records every time around.
Right. Well, there's still a lot of potential there, like you said. Several more albums to come, I hope. When the new album was first released, a lot of the critics were lukewarm, I guess, at best. In my opinion, it would seem that after the success of Gordon, the Barenaked Ladies were in almost a catch-22 situation insofar as the makeup of whatever came next was concerned. In hindsight now, do you think the band is completely satisfied with the direction it took, and to what extent does the reception to the album affect your thoughts on a next effort?
Well, I think I'm happy with the direction we took. I still really like the record a lot. And I think we were very prepared for what critics were going to say, because we knew if we put out an album that was like Maybe You Should Drive, and people would say, oh, they've gone serious. And we were fairly conscious of that when we recorded it. We left off several songs that we thought would be too overtly dark, because we didn't want to seem like we were trying to be serious. We just wanted to do what felt natural for us. And we felt if we balanced the album even more seriously, it would just be even harder for people to take.
Right.
Or harder for them to take seriously. But if we did a record that was really much more like Gordon, people would think we were just trying to reproduce the success we had
Right.
before. So we were kind of stuck that way, so we had to do something we were happy with.
Well, speaking of the songs you took into the studio, it's my understanding that there were some problems with some writer's block during the formulative stages of this album, and yet it was reported that the band went into the studio having to choose from like 12 of 21 songs. I don't know, Stephen, that sounds more like creative orgasm to me. Can you explain?
I don't know if it's really writer's block. It's just more that I think I have trouble writing songs on the road.
Right.
Which is something I'm trying to train myself to do. But so we had to take some time off in order for us to get some songs written. But as soon as we had the time off, the songs just started to pour out.
Right. Were there any other problems creatively or other during the production of this album?
Well, just before we started to record it, Andy Cregan told us he was going to leave the band.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, so that was the big crisis over the course of the record. We basically said, well, we'd like you to do this album with us, and then we'll find a replacement for you afterwards. But that was kind of, although it wasn't talked about throughout the recording, it was always lurking in the back of our minds, and we're thinking, well, when should we talk about this? When should we talk about this? And at the same time, Andy and Ben Mink, the producer, weren't really getting along all that well either, so there was a lot of tension in the studio. And so I think when we think of this record, we always think of that kind of tension and that kind of turning point in the band's career.
Right.
Somehow through it, I think we became a better band and a tighter unit, and Andy, I think, found his place in the group a little better and decided to stay, which was pretty nice.
So there will be no personnel changes at
Not
this
this
point?
time around.
No.
I hope never.
Okay. Well, if we could, I'd like to move a little more into the material now. I like all the songs on Gordon personally, but I think I enjoy Maybe You Should Drive a little bit more. In my opinion, anyways, it's a little more musically cohesive. Unlike Gordon, however, the songs on this new album are considerably less dependent on collective composition. Can you tell me how the band interrelated with each other during the construction of this album, and how that interrelation differed from the production of the Gordon album?
Well, I think in a lot of ways this album was a lot less band-oriented. I don't know. I think a lot of what we did was very similar. We did bed tracks with the whole band playing live, and then did our overdubs on top of that. But there was a lot of piecing together of stuff in this record, piecing together different takes and different overdubs, kind of taking things out of context and putting them back into place. And that was very much Ben's doing. I think on Gordon, there was a lot more kind of us screwing around in the studio. So those are the kind of that was the kind of the negative of this record. But the positive of this record is the fact that we knew what we were doing this time around. Where with Gordon, we were very fresh to it, and I think we had a little bit of studio fear going on. That now this time around we could be a lot more relaxed.
Well, as far as your own writing is concerned, I find myself that a couple of tracks off the Gordon CD could very easily slide onto the Drive album without a real loss of fluidity in the context of the album. What's interesting is that the songs I'm referring to, those being Brian Wilson and What a Good Boy, both involved you as a major contributor, especially Brian Wilson being a solo compositional effort. What kind of method do you use while songwriting, and do you adhere to any of your own personal rules or formulas?
I don't know if I really have any formulas. I try to stay away from formulas, but obviously there must be some, because there's certainly a sense of verse, chorus, bridge, and that kind of thing. But I do like to screw around with that. I find that the best songs I write are the ones where I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, if you look at like the first bridge in Brian Wilson, to be technical, I'm moving around chord to chord to chord. Ed always laughs his head off when I write these songs, because it's obvious that I have no idea where I'm going. I'm just kind of moving around chord to chord to chord, without paying attention to what the standard progression is supposed to be. So I find that when I pay, the less attention I pay to formulas, the better the song is usually.
Well, on that same note, then, what do you consider to be your best musical accomplishments? I.e., what are your favorite songs, and to what extent does your enjoyment of those songs carry over onto the stage, or are your performance favorites different than your recorded favorites?
Yeah, I think they are in some ways. Like, for instance, I really like Intermittently off the record. I think it's a good song, but live, Great Provider is really fun to play. A is really fun to play. But Brian Wilson's always fun to play, and that's one of those songs I kind of have a love-hate relationship with. Sometimes I think it's great, and sometimes I think it's terrible. Same thing with What a Good Boy. Those are probably my favorites. What a Good Boy and Brian Wilson, and probably Wrong Man Was Convicted intermittently.
Interesting. On your Gordon album, there were some obvious comedic nods to some other groups. For instance, in Hello City, you did a spin on the House Martins. In Grade 9, you tipped your hats off to Rush and Tom Sawyer. If there's any similar musical moments on the Drive album, they're much more subtle. I've had some people tell me, though, that they can hear some influences, but when they found out I was doing this interview, they wanted me to ask you specifically. I think that the most people have told me is that on the song... Geez, I forget what song it is now. Let me just look here. Everything Old is New Again. Some people say it sounds a little like Elvis Costello. Do you get that?
Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
Okay, I would too, actually.
I think it's... I don't know if it was actually kind of a nod to anything. Maybe more Beatlesy than
Beatles, yeah, with the band in the background, sure. Well, can you tell me who the band, the Barenaked Ladies, who they were actually listening to during the production of this album? And do you think anything at all seeped into the music this time around?
Well, I know Andy was listening to all kinds of different world music, especially at that time. I think he was listening to a group from Brazil called Wakachi, spelled Uakti, I think. I don't know. I know I was probably listening to a lot of Randy Newman when I was writing the record.
Right.
I guess, that's probably, I can't really think of what everybody else was listening to. We were probably listening to this record as we were making it.
Right.
That's probably about it. I think I went to see Tank Hog about 1 million times in Vancouver when we were making the record, but that was about it.
Okay, here's a question that interests me, and I think a lot of people around the station here really wanted me to ask this question. As you know, this interview is being done for CFMU, which is a campus and community alternative radio station. Since the release of this album, the song Alternative Girlfriend actually has been the most often played song around here by our DJs. Your upcoming concert at Hamilton Place, however, is being sponsored in part by 102.9 KLIT FM, which, apart from playing far too much Michael Bolton and Mariah Carey, is quite simply an adult contemporary station. Dare I say it, an easy listening station. Primarily, from what I've heard, they play Jane a lot, and every now and then you'll hear them play If I Had $1 Million. How do the Barenaked Ladies classify themselves nowadays, and do you feel that the cross-section of musical styles you present is an advantage or a detriment?
I call it light rock. Easy listening. No, I don't know what I call it.
Easy listening. Well, I didn't think you were serious on that. You're not an easy listening band as far as I'm concerned, but...
No, but it's funny. It is strange being like, I hear my songs in between, Michael Bolton and Mariah Carey, and there's Jane in between it, and I think, is this what I had intended? I think that's not who I had written the songs for. I hadn't. I don't write these songs so they get played in someone's office. During as their or a dentist's office or something like that.
Well, that's where they're being played in Hamilton, Stephen.
They're being played all over Canada, but it's not really in my control. I'm not gonna try and manipulate who listens to it.
Right.
I just want to write it, and hopefully the audience will find it. But it's not. It can't be that naive because there's so much image attached to it.
Sure.
That I grew up in high school and in university thinking I was a new waver,
right?
An alternative kid, a college rocker, and and here I am on the mainstream of the mainstream in Canadian music. I always wonder, am I content with that? But the best thing we can do is just continue to make fun of it whenever we can.
Which you do well.
Yeah,
certainly.
That's our job.
93.3. Oh, 93.3. Funky Radio. Oh, 93.3. Hamilton Radio. Oh, 93.3. Funky Radio.
Well, we're Barenaked Ladies, and whenever we're in Hamilton, we listen to 93.3 CFMU, redefining radio in Hamilton.
93.3. Oh, 93.3. Give me some of that funky radio. Oh, 93.3.
Given your current status, do you see a more streamlined approach to your music in the future, or are you just gonna do what comes naturally?
We'll just do what comes natural. I'm sure this next album will be totally ridiculous, I'm sure.
Oh, good.
Just because, because we have the opportunity to be ridiculous.
Right.
We made a really smooth pop record this time around, and next time around we'll make something that's really jagged and strange sounding, probably. But every time I say that, I could be totally wrong. I thought this last record was going to be totally weird and rockin' and whatever else, and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. In a recent article I read, you said, I don't know what the source of this is, and you said that the day you stop making each other laugh is the day the Barenaked Ladies are through.
Right.
With Gordon, the band's humor was emphasized throughout the album. It was blatantly obvious. On Maybe You Should Drive, it's somewhat more subtle, better defined probably as pleasantly witty than downright comical. And I know that kidding around is an important part of your live performances. Let's face it, the Barenaked Ladies have a reputation that will follow them for some time to come. This may sound like an unusual question, but how seriously does the band approach the humor it utilizes both on the stage and in the recording studio?
I think we just expect it more than anything else. I don't think there's any pressure for humor. I think it's just kind of like we expect it and we anticipate it from each other. That's how we relate to each other in a lot of ways.
So with Maybe You Should Drive, the band didn't feel any pressure whatsoever to be funny, quote unquote?
Well, I thought it was funny. I thought it was as funny as anything else I'd written.
Mm-hmm.
As I was writing that, I thought, that's great. That's just, to me, that was funnier than grade 9 or something. It just wasn't maybe as goofy, but as far as I was concerned, I thought it was funnier.
Right. Do you suppose this ability to laugh with each other is somewhat in jeopardy now that some of you, yourself included, have taken the marital plunge?
Our wives have senses of humor, too. Okay. I don't think we'd marry them if they didn't have senses of humor.
I probably have to agree with you there.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Ben Mink for a moment? A lot of acts don't give their producers that much consideration when talking about their albums. However, in most everything I've read so far, Ben Mink is emphasized as a major contributor to the final product. Exactly to what extent was he influential to Maybe You Should Drive?
Well, we wrote the songs. We played just about everything except for basically he did strings.
Right.
On the record, and we did most of the arrangements. But what he was, his role was basically to kind of pare everything down to its bare essentials. So we tend to have a lot of kind of frills on our music, and he tried to take a lot of those down to only what was necessary.
Right. Well, you're looking to go into the studio again this year. Can we expect to see him working with the Barenaked Ladies again, or will you continue to pursue new blood?
I think we're going to try and maybe produce this one ourselves.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that should be interesting.
Or I think we'll probably work with Michael Phillips again, the guy who did Gordon.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm almost done here. Overall, how have your personal lives changed since your rapid success a few years back? Do you suppose? Well, you've already mentioned Andy, but do you suppose any of the other Barenaked Ladies have at any time had regrets about their chosen professions?
Yeah, I'm sure people have had regrets about them. I know I haven't. I know Jim, at the time that he joined the band, was also running 800 meters for the U of T track team. I think had dreams of being in the Olympics and probably could have done it. So I'm sure there are times when he thinks, I could have done that. Which one did I want more? And the same thing. He could have been a classical bassist, like a symphonic bass player.
Right.
And so I'm sure there are times when he thinks, well, did I make the right decision? I'm sure people do that with any career choice.
Yeah,